My name is Robert Sheffield, and I'm the president of CORE, and I'll be serving as the moderator for this today's session. Welcome to the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and the California Reading Coalition's panel discussion on the state of reading instruction in California. California is a very large state, and it's very diverse in its geography as well as its demographics. If our state were to be ranked globally amongst nations, it would be the 5th largest economy in the world, just to give you some sense of the scale of who we are. If we were to rank just our K-12 public school enrollment amongst the populations of other states, our public school enrollment would be greater than the populations of 30 states, just to kind of get a sense of how large we are. We also know very much about our student populations. We are very blessed to have a minority-majority student population here that consists of very rich language learners of all different types of ethnicities and backgrounds, and they bring these cultural experiences into the classrooms each and every day. Because of the great diversity of our state, our teachers are looking for the best strategies to support their students, and teaching reading has always been a challenge here within our state, primarily because of many of the policies that determine the ways in which that children are taught to learn how to read are determined by local educators and their local school boards. And within our particular state, we have over 1,100 jurisdictions that are weighing in on how children are learning how to read within the state of California. I must say that it would be very difficult to say that this approach is working at scale, because when you take a look at some of our data is very, very challenging in many ways. So when we just look at the NAACP, the National Assessment of Educational Progress, California's 4th graders rank 40th amongst states. When we look at the data as it pertains to low income Latino children as well as African-American children, we're seeing that greater than 65% of those children are below grade level. So while we see that we have great opportunities here within our state, we also recognize that the ways in which instruction, in particular as it pertains to reading, has been taught still has not helped us to achieve the goals that we've set for ourselves. While other states like the state of Florida many years ago, almost two decades ago, began to shift state and local policies towards the science of reading, states like California have, for the most part, remained balanced literacy states. Florida, as well as many other states, have experienced the success of making those policy transitions, and it's shown up within the results that they see within various assessments of their students, as well as the general outcomes that their communities have for their children are being reached at this point in time. But California is not without its own sets of success stories. There are schools and districts within our state that are enacting evidence-based practices that follow the science of reading, and they are also seeing similar results. We're here today to hear from some of these leaders, and I think you'll find their stories to be both interesting, compelling, as well as inspiring. These folks are pioneers in many of the approaches that they're taking to their work, and they're changing the way that reading is being taught in the state of California. These folks also have many lessons that we can draw from, as well as many of them have some of the battle scars that have come with the challenges that have been associated with trying to establish good practices around structured literacy and evidence-based reading practices. For me, I'm really looking forward to the discussion today. I see that we're at a very critical time in our nation's history, as well as in our work as educators. 2 school years have been disrupted so far due to COVID, and we really still don't know what this school year is going to entail and what we're going to have to do to meet the challenges for this particular year. But I think that as educators, we can predict some things about the moment that we're in right now. I think what we can clearly predict is that we will need to have the type of focus on literacy instruction over the next few years like we've never had in the past before. We recognize that the disruptions due to COVID have created gaps within the ways in which children have learned. And if we don't actually think critically about how we systemically and systematically close these gaps, we will have children that will be living with the adverse impacts of this moment for the rest of their lives. So for me, this is extremely important as an educator, but I also say it's extremely important to my family. I am a father of a 1st grader, as well as a grandfather of a 1st grader and a kindergartner. So we're kind of living through this experience in real time right now. And at least fortunately for us, we are a family that actually kind of does a lot of literacy work at home. So my kids are going to be okay, but we're really concerned about how other families are going to be supported during this time. So we are, joined today by a set of educators who work daily within school communities to help educators, families, and leaders to solve for many of the challenges associated with reading and reading instruction. And these leaders know how to work with teachers. They also know how to work with students, and they also know how to work with systems. And as we work through this moment together, we have to also recognize that systems are going to need to move forward, and we're really going to need to be able to draw from the lessons of those that have worked in classrooms, those that have led school buildings, those that have coached teachers, those folks that have worked in pre-service programs, as well as those people that lead community-wide efforts, and of course, our system level leaders too. We're going to need everyone involved here. So the folks that we have as a part of our panel will help us with that part of our conversation. So quickly, I'd like to introduce our panelists, and then we'll get started with our panel discussions. First, and just if you can give a wave to the audience as we go around, we have Margaret Goldberg, who will be joining us here. Thank you, Margaret. We also have Michelle Rodriguez, Sharon Dunn, Leslie Zoroya, and Kareem Weaver will be joining us by video, and there's a slight possibility that he might actually be able to join us live, but we'll know that a little bit closer to his presentation time. With those introductions being done, I'm now going to actually do the formal introduction for Margaret and pass the time over to her. Margaret Goldberg is currently serving as a first grade teacher at a Title I school in Oakland, California. She previously served the district in a variety of roles, including early literacy lead, site-based literacy coach, and reading interventionist. In addition to teaching, she works as an educational consultant to help schools and districts align instruction with reading research. She is the co-founder of the Right to Read Project, a group of teachers, researchers, and activists committed to the pursuit of equity through literacy. Her writing is published on the Right to Read Project blog, righttoreadproject.com, and on Reading Rockets. Margaret, next 10 minutes are yours. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. So I'm coming at this work from a variety of different angles. First grade teacher being first, but also I got the pleasure of working as an education consultant for CORE and Pivot on a project with SCOE, the Sacramento County Office of Education, this year. So I'm going to be talking about that work. It is the Early Literacy Support Block Grant. I'm going to click through some slides that we shared in presentations with the educators involved in this work, and then talk a little bit about what we learned in this world of systems change. So the Early Literacy Support Block Grant started because it is the result of a lawsuit. California students sued because they were not becoming skilled readers in the primary grades, and they filed a class action lawsuit against the state of California. The result is California SB 98, Section 113. And what that did was allocate $3 million to fund a project called the Expert Lead in Literacy, and $47 million, which is available to eligible local education agencies, so it can focus on improving instruction in the primary grades. The way they structured this work is by making eligible the 75 lowest performing schools. And so we were working with 73 of those 75 schools which opted into this grant work. The goal was to support these schools in developing and implementing literacy instruction and support programs that were focused on improving the instruction in the early grades. This work is at the local level, so working directly with teachers and principals. It's at the regional level, building capacity, for example, with the county offices of education. And then we're also working on a statewide system of support, and that will be in place more in the next year as we're working on a coaching network, which I'll talk briefly about in a little bit. So the partners in this work were SCOE, Pivot Core, for whom I was working, CDE, CCEE, and the State Board of Education, and then all of these schools and districts that were eligible for this work. So I'm a first grade teacher in Oakland Unified. We had 11 schools that were eligible for this work. And so I was supporting schools and districts in this collaboration. We finished year one, so that was where we were working on developing the grant plans. So we wanted to make sure that there was a basic overview of evidence-based reading instruction and assessment. We guided the schools through root cause analysis to help them understand their data and why it is the way that it is. We worked on helping them create a literacy needs assessment so they could think through what they need in terms of curriculum and support and training. And they submitted literacy action plans that were due at the end of May. We're going to go into next year soon and strong, and the focus on that is going to be professional development around the evidence-based practices through the core reading academy and fundamentals. also a coaching network, and we're going to be working on developing this community of practices so that people are in collaboration doing this work rather than trying to recreate wheels in their own schools and districts. And then year 3 is going to be deepening the implementation, focusing on trying to build capacity so that as the short-term grant phases out, the good work can continue. So thinking about what we were working on, we were grounded in Scarborough's rope. We focused on language comprehension, making sure teachers and principals and district leaders understood the role of language comprehension in skilled reading, the role of word recognition in skilled reading, and understanding the importance of making sure that students are increasingly strategic with their language comprehension and increasingly automatic with word recognition. One of the go-to phrases that we said over and over again is like, if you care about reading comprehension, you have to care about word recognition and you have to care about students' oral language. So in the first session, we gathered people together to ground in a couple of understandings. One is that learning to read is not a natural process. And the second is that students need to crack the alphabetic code in the primary grades in order to be on track for later reading success. So we focused on the lower strand of Scarborough's rope, this word recognition strand. And we had participants work on a note catcher that you can see here. We gave really brief PD on effective practices for phonological awareness, and then had participants think about how it shows up in their materials and whether or not they have the supports they need in their curriculum and professional development. We did the same thing for letter knowledge and decoding and encoding and sight word recognition. So all the participants, about 6 to 7 per school site, were gathered together, filling in their understanding of how well they were supported in teaching word recognition. In session 2, we got to switch the focus to language comprehension. So we were working on making sure that teachers understood that reading comprehension isn't a skill you teach, it's a condition you create by making sure that students have the requisite background knowledge, vocabulary, they understand the grammar, able to do the verbal reasoning, and have the literacy knowledge of the genre that they're reading in. This session, we had a note catcher, just like we had for the word recognition, but we also had a really fun activity where we were looking through a read aloud text and talking about how that text, One Tiny Turtle, posed challenges to students in regards to their background knowledge or their vocabulary, what verbal reasoning would they need in order to grapple with this text. There were a lot of ahas that came to light when we were realizing that we need to make sure that we're supporting students in their language comprehension with rich text read aloud to them starting in the primary grades. In session 3, we talked about how different texts serve different purposes. So one of the activities that we did was have teachers and principals look at 2 different texts. Both of them were about the homes of animals, and they sorted the words in those texts to determine which text, a level text or a decodable text, would be better for helping students understand the logic of the alphabetic code. We also talked about which text would be better for language comprehension. Would it be a level text or a complex text read aloud? So we're able to see the instructional decisions that we have to make in order to ensure that our instruction is as effective as it could be. Once they had an overview of really basic understanding of evidence-based practices and the decisions that we need to make as educators to make effective lessons for our students, then we got into root cause analysis. So in root cause analysis, the participants took their note catcher. So what had they said about the supports they have for word recognition? What had they said about the supports they had for language comprehension instruction? And then how could they look at that and think through, well, what's the cause of our student data based on what we're working with in terms of curriculum and instructional practices, data collection? They were able to work on a Jamboard and brainstorm all of the reasons that they think might be causing the problems in their student data. So for example, a lot of sites realize that they don't have a formalized assessment system to be able to make sure that they're seeing progress from kinder to first grade to second grade. A lot of it has been piecemealed assessments. So they were working on creating a deeper understanding of why there needs to be alignment across grade levels in instruction. So I'm going to pause for a moment, give you a chance to skim some of the feedback that came from that root cause analysis. Maybe take a moment and read one bullet point and think about it. The thing that stood out for me as I was reading these feedback forms is this one, that we need to be honest with ourselves and dig deeper into the root causes. So rather than thinking that the student data is something that is outside of our control, rather than thinking that there's all sorts of external causes for low student performance when it comes to reading. It's really helpful for schools to be able to do a curriculum audit and see what are we doing that's resulting in the student data that we're seeing. So we as facilitators of this work realized that schools with strong leaders were seizing this opportunity to develop a cohesive plan. Like, they were excited about the work. Leaders and teachers were more clearly seeing the gaps in students' foundational skills because we were encouraging them to collect targeted data. A lot of the schools understood reading just as a process of a series of levels, like a child is a level C reader, and maybe they'll progress to be a level D reader. And what we were asking them to do is to drill down in foundational skills data and find out, well, how well are they doing in their ability to hear the sounds and words and to know the spelling patterns that represent those sounds? How well are they doing in reading fluently? This prompted a lot of really great discussions. Teachers started speaking up about their need for higher quality curriculum. They were realizing they didn't have the tools they needed to be able to provide the instruction they wanted to do, and that they needed high quality professional development. Cross-site collaboration was awesome. So we had smaller sessions where people were able to meet in breakout rooms and talk about their plans, talk about their root cause analysis. We were able to see that there were systemic issues, and we were able to start talking about some of the ideas for common solutions. In sessions 6 and 7, this is where we started setting goals. So we had SMART E goals that we were writing. There's a closed frame here that you can see. And the goal was to pick, we wanted each site to pick maybe 2 or 3 goals to really focus on, and to make sure that they thought, well, to reach these goals, what do we actually need to have and be able to do? So we did a needs assessment. Then talked a fair amount about the need for stakeholders to make sure that they understood that all the needs for this were addressed. So I'll pause again to give you a chance to skim the feedback on these needs assessments, maybe read one bullet point in a little bit more depth.
And Margaret, we're almost at time, so just want to
Perfect.
Yes.
We're good. So what we learned as we talked with the schools about their needs was that cross-site collaboration within the same district brought to light systemic problems, especially with scheduling, and that schools really appreciate explicit guidance about what they should use and what they should do in order to be able to improve early literacy outcomes. So then they were ready to bring it all together, to create these literacy action plans that they would submit for the grant funding to be able to engage in years 2 and 3 of the work. I'll take a moment to pause so you can see it, maybe read one of the bullet points for the feedback. The enthusiasm for this work was really high. And then just to close, here's what we accomplished. We worked with 73 schools. Each school had roughly 6 members attending these sessions. We delivered 75 PD sessions from January to May. There were 350 hours of assistance. This was like tech assistance for thinking through, what did I learn and how does it apply to my student data? What did I learn? How does it apply to what I'm doing at my school site? 70 plans were submitted, and 68 passed the content review, meaning that these sites started to understand what changes would be necessary in order to be able to improve early literacy outcomes. And those plans are pending CDE review. Thanks so much, Robert.
And thank you, Margaret. And the project that you just detailed is phenomenal work. And fortunately for me, I'm coming into the leadership position in CORE while this project has already been up and running. And this is one of the projects that I'm most excited about. And what I also just can quickly note, I've been working with a number of other states, and pretty much kind of no other state is kind of taking this particular focus in its lowest performing schools to address the needs of children that have the need to improve their literacy backgrounds. So this is just a great project. And what I do want to get to is, as teachers, we tend to base our practice very much on what we believe. And so, yes, research can influence us, but we oftentimes kind of go from our belief frame first and foremost. And then as people that have to work with teachers, we also kind of think about how we have to shift beliefs as a part of improving practice too. So Margaret, I'd just love to hear how you've learned how to work on the belief frame with teachers as you're also working on shifting their practices too.
So I think what's happened for a lot of teachers, same thing that happened for me, which is that we didn't notice the water we were swimming in. So we just understood reading as like, there are these reading levels, A through Z, and we need to kind of get kids exposed to level D so they get a little bit more independent with that, and then they'll move on to level E. Like, we thought of it as stair steps. And I think when we actually look at Scarborough's rope and see the components of skilled reading, and then we actually look at our materials and think, so these are the components of skilled reading. How well am I actually teaching it? So if kids need to crack the alphabetic code, what books should I be giving to them? And how will those books influence their understanding of how written English works? And I think one of the things that has happened pretty much for every teacher that I've worked with is the second you start looking at your materials with a new lens, looking to see how well does it support you and explaining concepts really clearly to students who need a lot of time and support grappling with those concepts, you start realizing you need help. And as long as you're in a safe place where it's okay to ask for help, it's okay to say, like, I don't actually understand what verbal reasoning is. Can you show me what that is? And what do I need to do to be able to teach that to students so that they can reason with the text? You just need a safe place to be able to ask those questions so that we're able to fill in some of the gaps in teacher knowledge that started back when we were in teacher prep.
Thank you so much, Margaret. And audience, you'll get a chance to hear a little bit more from Margaret later on. We're going to now transition to Dr. Michelle Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez is the superintendent of schools in Pajaro Valley Unified School District, and it is an inspired leader of uncommon ability, engaging the educational community in an authentic and intentional transformation process to support efforts that value innovation, affirm student strengths and capacity, increase rigor, and increase joy to prepare all students to be college and career ready. Dr. Rodriguez is dedicated to students in urban and rural and low socioeconomic districts for over 29 years, with a focus on vulnerable student population. She embraces the powerful long-term responsibility of improving the lives of students, families, and the educational community. Due to the implementation of many new innovative programs, she has received many awards for her leadership. Amongst these are the 2020 Community Health Trust Award, the 2019 United Way Community Hero Award, the 2019 Broad Fellowship Award, and the 2019 League of Innovative Schools Award. So Dr. Rodriguez, the time is yours. Thank you. And if you can come off of mute, that'll be great.
So I'm so excited to be able to talk about the work that we're doing in Pajaro Valley Unified School District. So it will dovetail perfectly with the work that Margaret was talking about. She'll even see some references to some of her slides. So we really believe that our early literacy initiative is linked to our belief in educational equity. So we believe that early literacy is a human right and is instrumental to the work that we do for the students and families that we serve. So we serve a little over 20,000 students. 66% of those students are English learners, 81% are students of poverty. And so I mention that because when we think about what do we care about and what do we believe in, we have what we call an expanded definition of student success. And one of those things, if you look off to the left, is really that there's a strong academic and literacy foundation. Now, whether it's mathematics, science, or any other content, literacy is really the foundation to all of that work. Our definition for educational equity, you'll see on the right. And so most of the school districts, if you ask them what educational equity was, they would say the same thing. Well, we're leveraging the system's time, attention, and resources. We'd also probably talk about advocacy for students. For us, it's not only advocacy for students, but also their families and their communities, so that they can fulfill their unlimited potential. We talk, just speaking to what Margaret was saying, we talk about how do we change beliefs. We believe we change beliefs by changing experiences, which change expectations, which then changes beliefs. And so we do everything in Pajaro Valley pilot to scale, and it's been really successful for us because we believe that if we really are going to truly have educational equity, then we have to prove that we are going to put our time, attention, and resources to our most vulnerable students. And we started our early literacy initiative in 17-18 with our lowest performing 3 sites. So that was just 27 teachers and 594 students would have been encapsulated in that. And then throughout the years, including last year, which was a pandemic year, you'll see that we had already reached all 17 sites, but we had more teachers that gone on. So we not only have done additional sites, but we're also going up in the grades. And so now, as of last year, we are at all 17 elementary sites, 305 teachers, which serves 6,242 students. And what I would say to whether it's a board member or another superintendent or any type of administrator is you have to have a sustained commitment. So what we know is that anything that you do for a year or two is not going to have significant impact. You have to have this continual commitment, which does require both your time, attention, and your resources to happen. And so we do believe in the science of reading. And so we did a multi-year, we really believed it was not only innovative, but a transformative pilot to scale model. So we used to do whole group. So you would walk in and you would see all of our teachers teaching a whole group lesson on early foundational literacy, phonics. And now what you'll find is in groups of 9 or less. We wanted to make sure that it was grounded in brain research. So we used to be a Lucy Calkins district, and now we have shifted. We now use SIPs as part of our curriculum. I'll go over that in a little bit. And most importantly, we wanted to do cycles of improvement and provide job embedded coaching. So all of us have gone to professional developments, whether it's when we were a teacher or an administrator, and we thought that we had it, and then we went back to implement it. And sure enough, when we went to implement it, that's when we realized all the confusions were happening. And so we're providing multi-level. So if you are a coach, we started with our coaches, we train you, then our principals, our teachers, our instructional assistants, and our parents. So we're really providing job embedded coaching. I won't go over the Scarborough rope because that was already done, but I will do the mathematic formula, which is off to the left. And this really hit our teachers in that it's a multiplication, it's multiplied. So decoding times language comprehension. A lot of times before we thought it was a summative, but it actually is. If you do not have good decoding or you do not have good language comprehension, then you will never have good reading comprehension. And so what you'll see is that we have shifted over time, and we've really changed the mindset. So it used to be very much, what can children do differently in order to learn? We've now shifted that mindset to be about, what do I need to do as a teacher? What do I need to do as an administrator in order to ensure that learning is occurring? And so off to the left, you'll see some of our process maps that we're doing, where we're talking about whether in yellow is the process, or whether there's questions, which are the blue bubbles, and decision points along the way. to where with each child, we're looking at the data, we're figuring out how we can help support and change what we're doing, change our instructional practice, look at our routines to be able to really focus on mastery-based phonics. So we used to teach and then hope that you got it. And if you didn't, there was a question of, so why didn't that student learn that? Versus now it's really us looking at the data. We don't move you on if you did not pass your mastery test. So there's a mastery test every 10 minutes or every 10 lessons. And now we do what we call a double dose if they did not pass their mastery test. And we're really had harnessed that sense of urgency. And you can see one of our great teachers do this, because even last year during the pandemic, we continued to do SIPs. So we had a time in our day where every single student was seen during SIPs. And we made sure that the professional development continued. So now our teachers feel so confident in what they're doing that they are actually recording their lessons. So this is a snapshot of a lesson which a teacher sent in. So our teachers now, almost 100% of our teachers provide teacher recorded lessons where our coaches look at it, provide feedback to it. We still do coaching and demonstration lessons. Our district office coaches have office hours so that all the teachers, when they have those questions, every week they can come in and ask those questions. And we do instructional learning walks to where all of cabinet goes through and we look for evidence of what we're hoping to find. And we do data review visits with our staff so that we're really targeting cycles of improvement and celebrating the work that our great teachers are doing. So one of the beliefs I have on sustained commitment to early literacy is making sure that you have the materials for your teachers. And so, as you know, each grade level has different things that they are focusing on. So part of SIPs, one of the things that you have to have is you have to know letter names up to 21 before you can start SIPs. So we did about 2 years ago now, we did a large focus on ABC foundational books. We make sure that we equip them with Reading Success by David Kilpatrick. And then we start with SIPs. And so up all the way to 5th grade, we do have some students who are doing SIPs. And we make sure that all the children have those materials and they have that ability to have success. We also use Benchmark as our core, and we also use Lexia. So we ensure that Lexia is used during the independent time. And so we always love to share. If you want to know more information about our literacy initiatives, we do what we call one-sheeters, which are infographics. And you can always email me, follow me. If you go on our website, you will see all of those. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And in listening to you, I can hear that your teams not only just depended upon the science of reading, but you also depended upon implementation science to determine how you were going to roll out your initiative. So the question that I have for you is kind of based upon, my experience working with a lot of different leaders throughout the country. And when they get to this moment where they know that they have kind of a crisis that's facing students, they're equity-minded leaders, and in many cases, they want to solve for the problem as fast as possible. So therefore, they roll out district-wide at one time. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose the pattern that you did to go from pilot to scale, as you noted, and just what are the trade-offs between doing it in a very deliberate way as you chose to do it and the success that you've had versus kind of that whole full-scale rollout that oftentimes happens in many systems? Thank you.
Yeah, so I think the key for us was to have ambassadors and spokespeople that were people's own peers. So I had a teacher who is part of the first pilot. When we first started, he did not want to do it, and he was very frustrated that we were doing SIPs, which is very routine based because it's about recircuiting the brain. He 2 years later is one of my main spokespeople that he tells other teachers, what I learned is it's not really about me, it's about the students. And so when you have your own teachers, when you have your own administrators that are able to be ambassadors about the good work, then it takes it on. So instead of having people say, no, we don't want to be part of that initiative, I had people angry at me that they couldn't be part of the second year. So I think that's a good problem to have.
That's an absolutely great problem to have. And thank you for your presentation. And we're going to transition over to Sharon Dunn now. Sharon Dunn is a former principal of a high poverty elementary school. During her tenure as principal, her instructional expertise substantially improved reading outcomes, evidenced by high ELA CAS results. Her leadership expertise and school data were featured in Dibble's newsletter nationwide. She was featured in Glenn Educational Leadership Podcast, Unpacking Progress, What It Takes to Raise School Literacy Rates. She presented her school's literacy improvement at the California Department of Education Title I Conference, entitled Wild About ESSA, the Association of California School Administrators Mid-State Conference, as well as the 2021 National ESSA Conference. Sharon supports schools and districts with instructional leadership for improved reading outcomes as an MTSS leadership consultant. Sharon, the time is yours.
Thank you, Robert. I'm going to share my screen real fast. Let's see. All right. Are we set? Yeah.
Yes, we are.
All right. I just thank you for that introduction, and I'm just honored to be amongst this panel of esteemed colleagues. I'm in awe of everybody's work. You're just going to hear from a lone principal journey that we happen to figure things out along the way using science of reading research, and just have such a passion, myself and my teachers, that it's about equity, that teaching students how to read is the biggest gift of a lifetime for our students as well as our nation. And so just to give you some perspective as a new principal, you just don't know what you don't know, taught several grade levels, was on several committees, were in different positions, a categorical program specialist. And I thought I was equipped okay, but boy, you just don't know what's lurking beneath. And so just to give you some perspective, Loudoun Elementary is located in Bakersfield, California, and it's in the southern San Joaquin Valley, about 120 miles north of LA. We are an all walking school. Our district, one elementary and 25 schools, 20 elementaries, 5 junior highs. And I tell you, we have about 800 students. And when I was appointed principal in 9-10, we were about 74% poverty, 50% Hispanic, 18% EL, and 11% African-American. With just a few short years, by 2014, 13-14, it jumped to 87% poverty, 70% Hispanic, 28% EL, 14% African-American. And I say that because our students were smart. They were coming through our doors as is, but I tell you, our teaching wasn't keeping up with our students, and we were not meeting their needs instructionally. Things changed fast for our school. It wasn't status quo, close your door, do whatever you want, as it was before. We had to recalibrate things. And that's where data comes in. When I was first appointed, I was a new principal, didn't make a lot of changes the first year, but there weren't any reading assessments. And I knew enough about a universal screener that we need this. We brought in Dibble's Next, which is now Acadience. And that was our jumping off point of the real aha moment. That's what was lurking like. The data really told us a lot about our student needs. And I start with the kindergarten data because that was truly the seminal moment. We had great kindergarten teachers, but this is what the data was. Our students came to us from their homes about 36% proficient to be on track for reading. And by the end of the year, it went down to 28%. That was alarming. I mean, alarming. That meant 72% of our kinders were going to enter first grade highly at risk. And I thought, our ship is sinking. And I don't even know how to prevent this. What do we do? It was alarming. So we just, I equipped myself with some knowledge, went to the Acadian Super Institute, figured out more about the assessment, what the true meaning was, dug deeper. And as Joe Torgerson said, the best solution to the problem of reading failure is to allocate resources for early identification and prevention. And I share that quote because for us, it was all the way across the school, but kindergarten was so telling with those kinders, 72% of them leaving at risk. And I thought, that's what we need. We need to prevent this. And we needed to put some structures in place, because as you see with this graph, we have oral reading fluency on the left and we have grade levels down the right side. And kids that come into school that learn to read and can do okay, they're typical readers, their trajectory is the green. And those kids that may not have the decoding abilities or great language structure, they tend to struggle and continue to struggle. And as you can see, by sixth grade, the gap is huge. It widens. Not that you can't help those kids in the intermediate grades, but boy, to really try to prevent and get the foundational skills in place in kindergarten, first and second grade is critical. So we needed to structure an MTSS implementation. And our district had a pretty big focus on identification and placement. And we just flipped that around and said, we've got to improve reading outcomes. We've got to meet our students where they are. And we need help to do that with the structure of MTSS that help put things in place. I knew enough about the 5 big ideas of reading with phonemic awareness, vocabulary and oral language, phonics, oral reading fluency, and reading comprehension. But we really didn't know enough about like how much, when, and how much time do we need to spend each day, and how do we effectively create small group instruction. And we have our screener and it's telling us some things, but we needed to dig deeper. And to do that, we brought in a diagnostic assessment, which was truly where the rubber met the road. I mean, that's where we picked up some steam. We, with the diagnostic assessments, it was able to reveal the lowest skill deficits. And for us, we used 95% groups diagnostic assessment for their phonological screener and their phonics screener. And that revealed all of the reading problems, helped us fix the reading problems. We utilized materials and processes that they offered. We had ongoing PVD from them, professional development, at the beginning of the year, mid-year in January, and in March. And we did that year after year. So our teachers could become reading experts. It was truly an amazing transformation. We, in the structures of MTSS, we utilized our assessments. They were living and breathing with our diagnostic screeners. I mean, we utilized that material all the time with the progress monitoring piece in place with Acadians as well. Our diagnostic to reveal the lowest skill deficits, and then our outcome with the CASP results. We put a schedule in place, aligned all our resources, our personnel. I hired more Title I paraprofessionals, trained them. Myself, along with our teachers and our paras, we had the professional development together. We moved things together. We blocked off our schedule. So this is just a glimpse. The green area is differentiation of the core. It was a portion of our core ELA, small group instruction. We pushed in with supplemental personnel for that small group instruction. And then the orange block was our 30 minutes of intervention, and that was strictly based on the diagnostic assessment and then fluency and comprehension measures. And then the blue and the purple, that was recess and lunch, and the white areas were back in homeroom or core. So this is just a little simple view graphic of a multi-tiered system of support. Is just making sure our systems and structures were in place, our schedules, personnel management, universal screener, diagnostic, progress monitoring, all that was in place, multiplied by the instruction and curriculum piece, our instructional routines. Did we differentiate effectively, focusing on the 5 essential literacy skills, being explicit, systematic, and sequential, having that structured literacy component in place, and utilizing our intervention at the fullest. Then we always viewed things through the simple view of reading lens, which was our decoding multiplied by our language comprehension, as mentioned before, and which results in reading comprehension. Reading comprehension is the outcome of these things being in place. And that's what our teachers learned along the way. We also were always talking about the Scarborough's rope to become increasingly strategic with our language comprehension and increasingly automatic with word recognition to create readers who could read accurately and fluently and comprehend complex text. We just kept our focus with our intervention on the 3 critical components for effective intervention, really making sure that phonemic awareness training was at the advanced level, that we had systematic and explicit phonics instruction, and that we had lots of reading of connected text, including decodable text, but including, our complex text, creating that language comprehension structure with the complexity of text read out loud for those that were not reading on grade level. So kind of in a nutshell, this is just to put some bullet points together. We began with our addressing the foundation with the universal screener and the diagnostic. We supported with school-wide schedules, personnel, materials, processes. We addressed the foundational reading deficits and implemented MTSS structure. And we constructed a solid core instruction as well. We differentiated with small group instruction. We impact the Common Core standards and utilize the CASP IABs and instruction for writing as well. The important thing to note was staying the course. We had teachers come and go. Someone's like, this is too hard. This is a lot of work. And it was, but boy, it was a groundswell. Our data fed our motivation. We stayed the course. Our data was living and breathing, and the data would come back and say, oh, these kids are improving. This is how, this is where. Success breeds success. And through those data discussions and that data driving everything, it was a beautiful thing to see. Just to show you, this is multiple years of our Acadience data, or Dibble's Next at this point. And the green, that very first green bar was the first slide I showed you. They came in 36%, ended 28%. Then you could see the slow and steady jump of instructional practice as we equipped our teachers, as we brought that diagnostic in and materials and processes to help improve reading outcomes. We were up to 90% in proficiency for kindergarten, and for PSF, for phoneme segmentation, we were 93%. That was the foundation that those kids, it would trickle up to the rest of the grades. And each grade level, we had this data. The end result was our CASP. As you look at this, the blue bar is the first year in 2015. As you can see, it was dismal. We were the last school, the lowest performing school in our district. And that was just hard to take because we had hardworking teachers, but we had to get those right levers in place. We had to get those right structures in place, equip the teachers, give them the professional development and the support they needed to help improve the reading outcomes. And as you see, by 2019, I look at the third grade jump. It's just amazing to me. Our teachers were really sad that with the onset of the pandemic in 2020, we couldn't see the CASP results because they just knew, oh my gosh, it would be great to see what that next bar would be. I just want to leave you with the thought that this is kind of what we mold over, and as a staff, that high expectations for success will be judged not only by our initial staff beliefs and behaviors, but also by the organization's response when students do not learn. And it was all, for us at Loudoun, it was all about our response. What are we going to do? We have 72% of our kinders going into first grade at risk. How are we going to respond to that? And that's what launched us on our journey to search out and find science of reading research and evidence-based practices to help improve those reading outcomes ultimately.
Sharon, thank you so much. And I really appreciate the focus on multi-tier systems of support here as a part of your presentation. And what I'm wondering is, how have you learned how to help, either within your own school or with the educators you're now supporting, how have you helped those leaders and teachers to overcome the barriers to implementing MTSS models? We know that they're really challenging in terms of the pressure they put on teachers and leaders to think differently about time and space and the use of resources and how to actually apply interventions in very thoughtful and deliberate ways. But just love to hear, how you've learned how to help leaders and teachers to overcome those kinds of barriers as they're implementing MTSS systems.
Oh boy, yeah. There's no silver bullet. Sometimes implementation can be a little painful, but you learn right alongside your teachers. You equip them, you support them, you listen. It's the organic conversations. Putting structures in place is one thing, but actually doing something with them, really having the data drive the instruction and learning, equipping the teachers with professional development. I think all of those components helped us with a successful implementation of MTSS. It was living and breathing. It wasn't just we're doing this, we're doing MTS, we have that in place. It was who we were. I mean, that's how we instructed. It was through these structures. So it just helping them was through the data, through the successes, that ongoing professional development. It all aligned with MTSS. It all worked together. So that was the structure. The MTSS structure was what held it all together. So that professional development and the data, that's, to me, that's what was empowering for the teachers and leaders, and help them embrace it.
Thank you so much, Sharon. And we're now going to transition over to Leslie. Leslie Zoroya is the project director for Reading Language Arts in the Division of Curriculum and Instructional Services for the Los Angeles County Office of Education. She provides literacy, professional development, and technical assistance to the 81 school districts in LA County in both online and in-person formats. She is the co-host of Leading Literacy, a podcast devoted to spreading expertise in all things literacy related, and a co-author of the recent publication, Supporting the African American Learner, a guide for transforming beliefs, systems, and practices for Black students. She also coordinates the LA County Spelling Bee and Literacy Lift's annual conference. Leslie, time is yours.
Hi, thanks so much. I'm so excited to be here today to share just a little bit of what we've been doing in Los Angeles County. So let me share my screen. And if you can stomach one more presentation, then let's see here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. All right, so just for some context, our office, the Los Angeles County Office of Education, is the nation's largest regional education agency. We oversee 81 school districts in LA County, serving more than 1.4 million students. And as you can see on the screen here, 70% of those students are socioeconomically disadvantaged, and there are more than 258,000 students classified as English learners in our county. We also have many students with disabilities, as well as homeless and foster youth. Our office also administers California's largest Head Start program, along with a host of other fiscal and programmatic responsibilities. The work is never ending, as you can imagine. I work in curriculum and instructional services, and our role is to be a direct support provider to schools and districts through professional development, coaching, and technical assistance. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So with that, I am in charge of K-12 literacy support, and our big reading initiative this year began actually in 2018 with Emily Hanford's work on Hard Words, Why Kids Can't Read, her award-winning audio documentary series. And it got us thinking about instruction across LA County and digging a little deeper. And so I pulled reading scores across the county and saw that there were literally thousands of kids who were not reading with proficiency. And the more we looked, we saw a myriad of reading approaches with very differing results. The data showed that clearly we were not doing something right in LA County, and that kids of color were suffering the most. And so, as other speakers have said today, it became an equity issue, and we knew we had to do something. And so we started thinking, what can we do that will make a big impact for our students? So what we decided to do was develop a reading consortium called Getting Reading Right. We launched it last year in the middle of the pandemic online. And so we host one online 90-minute meeting a month, solely focused on building teacher knowledge in the science of reading. So this year we had 120 teachers that signed on with us, and they stayed. We said to them, if you decide that you want to do this, you need to make sure that you come to every meeting and that you stay. And you come once a month and you stay with us the whole year. And they did. We couldn't believe it. And we built the program, just as the other speakers have said, also around Scarborough's reading rope. And we focused on one major element of the rope each month. We had three major goals to our consortium. We wanted to first and foremost build teacher knowledge. We found that teachers were sorely lacking in the necessary foundational knowledge and how kids actually learn to read. They were relying on curriculum that they didn't really understand. And they were picking and choosing parts of the lesson to teach. And we realized that they didn't know what they didn't know. They thought they were doing things right. Whoops, sorry about that. Oh my goodness, I'm going back the wrong way. Let's see here, here we go. So we also wanted to change teacher practice. We required universal screeners. We showed them what to do with the info. They did not know, most of them did not have universal screeners and or did not know what to do with them. We focused on what it means to have explicit and systematic instruction. We had them apply each monthly drill down to their own curricula and analyze it for strengths and weakness, because we really wanted them to feel like they were smarter than their curriculum. And we also wanted them to think about, where do they need to supplement? Where were there holes in their curriculum, so that they could come up with, what are the other things we need to be doing? This was really key. Teachers cannot make sound instructional decisions without the background knowledge of how kids actually learn to read. We also taught them evidence-based strategies for struggling readers, as well as concurrently offered a series on dyslexia that most of them also attended. And finally, we vetted a ton of resources, especially because we were in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of this reading instruction was online. Teachers were hungry for resources. Help us, they were screaming. So we digitized a lot of reading resources, and we created a lot of stuff, and we directed them to great resources that we found online, especially from UFly. If you haven't seen the UFly site, it's amazing. University of Florida, they have a wealth of reading material. So we use that quite a bit. So here's how we structured the monthly meetings. We developed self-assessments, which I'll show you an example of in a minute. These were key so that teachers could analyze, what do they already know about that element of the reading rope, and how are they currently teaching it? They would take it, discuss it in breakout rooms, and then we delve into the topic for that month based on that self-assessment. We actually spent 7 months on the word recognition part of the reading rope. And this is where we did that primarily because, similar to what Margaret was talking about in the first presentation, a lot of them did not, this is where their weakness was. They knew about language acquisition, they knew about oral language, they knew about vocabulary development. They did not have a strong knowledge in decoding. So we spent a lot of time there. We would also then have them do the curriculum analysis, we would share the resources, and then we would give them some homework either listening to a podcast or reading an article or watching a video related to the topic of that month. So here's an example of our self-evaluations. Each one had 3 categories: pedagogical knowledge, instruction, and assessment. And we asked them to rate themselves using the descriptors: I have limited awareness, I'm aware but not focusing on it, I'm working on it but it's not fully there, and it's a strength in my instruction. These self-assessments were key. They helped teachers to see what they did not know. They took it at the beginning of the module and at the end of the module, and they were blown away with how many gaps they had in their knowledge. They didn't know. They weren't aware that they had so many gaps. So these were really pivotal. So here's some screenshots from feedback that we got from teachers. I've been doing PD a really long time, more than 20 years, and I have never seen feedback like this. 100% positive. I mean, someone always complains about something, right? They literally gushed about how impactful the year of training was for them. And what it showed us, what it proved to us, is that they wanted this information and they took it to heart and they changed their practices in their classroom. And so that was super impactful. We also created a website of resources, which I'll put in the chat when I'm finished here. And so on the website, you will see podcast links, you'll see modules, videos we created. We created more than 30 short modules, 5-minute modules, so on drill downs, so that teachers could go in and learn a quick skill and turn around and replicate that right away. And so the website has been a pivotal resource, not just for the consortium, but in general. We've shared it across the state. This summer, we also took time to think about how it went. And so we really decided that we needed to add more explicit callouts for English learners. We also wanted to add more on culturally responsive teaching. We wanted to make sure that they were attending to those. Most of our struggling readers are brown and Black. And so to ignore both the English learner aspect and the culturally responsive teaching, we thought was an error on our part. And so we added more explicit callouts. And we created a deeper scope and sequence so that we could really see, what are we covering? What are we missing? What do we need to tweak for next time? So how we deliver it is, this summer we actually tried it as a boot camp. We want to create as many opportunities for teachers to participate. And if they can't do the online monthly meeting, we wanted to think about how could we do it in other ways. So we did a summer boot camp at the end of July or end of June. We had 70 teachers come. It was amazing. They stayed, they loved it. It went really well. So we think we'll do it again next summer. We're also beginning our new year-long consortium starting up next month in the afternoons. We also have districts have contracted with us to do customizable cohorts. So we have cohorts that we are doing coaching with them, we're doing their paraprofessionals, all of that. We've also developed an online self-paced course that we're launching in the fall, and we're in year 2 development of the program as well. We want to make sure that teachers continue their learning, so we're working on a year 2 strand. So what's next for us? We applied for a big grant in California. We're hoping to get it. It would allow us to do a more comprehensive evaluation. So we're hoping that we get that. If not, we'll soldier on anyway. We've already got a statewide consortium going. Other county offices of ed have reached out to us and said, hey, what are you doing over there? We want to look at your model and replicate it. And then, as I said, we also have customized district cohorts. We're in year 2 development, and I'm creating right now a grade 6-12 consortium for this. There are a lot of older teachers of older students that are struggling that really want this information as well. So we're working on that. And then we also partner with Glean Education on a new dyslexia cohort. So that's what's going on in LA. So thanks for letting me share just a little bit about it. And I hope it was useful, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions or anything.
Leslie, thank you so much for the presentation. There's one quick question and I'll have a bigger question. The question is coming from Alicia in our audience, and she'd like to know, would you be willing to share the self-assessments?
That is a really good question. Yeah, sure. I can share at least an example of one.
Okay. All right. So if we can figure out how to make that sharing take place, we can communicate that to the audience.
Okay.
The question that I have for you
Sure.
is, I can see that you're an extremely skilled professional developer, and as I'm looking at some of the design principles that you're describing, I see kind of personalized learning for teachers. I also see, you're thinking critically about where teachers may be also within their tenure within the workforce,
Mhm.
as well as their local context, because things are. I live in LA County, so I recognize
Right.
the diversity
It's all
that's
over the
here too.
map.
Absolutely. So I'm just wondering, what have you learned in your 2 decades of training teachers that is now being applied to this PD model that you think is absolutely critical to it being successful?
Well, I think number one, when you know better, you do better. And a lot of teachers felt a lot of shame. They said, I think about what I know now after going through this and all the kids that I wrecked. And we said, this is a no shame zone. Absolutely. When we know better, we do better. So that's number one. I think number two is also exactly what you were pointing to, which is you have to honor people's journey, where they're at in their journey, and that we're all might be in a different place, and that's okay. And we just need to be on the same page and everybody get there. It's one of the reasons that we are including paraprofessionals in this work as well, because we feel like those are helpers in the classroom that are doing small group instruction, and they're doing a variety of things with kids that they really need this background knowledge as well. So I think just hitting across all levels and honoring people where they're at is huge.
All right, thank you so much, Leslie. And if anyone in the audience wants to reach out to Leslie to ask more questions about those resources, her contact information is right here on the screen right now, and feel free to reach out and we'll be able to share that later on as well too. We are now transitioning into our final panelist, and that will be Dr. Kareem Weaver. Kareem will be joining us via video for what it looks like right now. So we're going to go ahead and cue that video up. And once we are done with Kareem's video, then we'll go into whole group Q&A. And if you have any more questions that you'd like to kind of get prepared for the whole group Q&A, please add those to the Q&A section, and then I'll review those questions and add those to the list that I'll be using to facilitate that time. So with that said, we're going to pass the time over to Kareem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kareem Weaver. Happy to be with you. I'm going to share my screen and present some of the things that we're doing here in Oakland that we think may be useful to you. I'm representing FULCRUM, which stands for Full and Complete Reading is a Universal Mandate. So FULCRUM's a nonprofit I started, support the work of NAACP as well as other organizations in the Oakland Bay Area to improve literacy outcomes, which we've got 11 of the lowest 75 schools for third grade reading in California. So it's a problem, so we want to address it. And we tried to get to the root of the problem. We know our kids are flunking out of college and dropping out of high school, but what's the root of that? Well, algebra is a dropout class along with English. We identified that kids have a lack of skill with using complex texts, one of the shifts in Common Core, and they don't have a good foundation for reading. And we came up with a strategy to address this. So we did a lot of research to find out what the problem was. We realized that people have been discussing the solutions and identifying the challenges for the last 25, 30 years. The American Federation of Teachers has really come out a strong position on effective of the elements of an effective reading program. You can see it on their website. And I will, whenever you see the word EndNote there at the bottom of one of my slides, I'll be adding a link or a source of that item on a page. And then secondly, we looked at John Hattie's learning, he did a meta-analysis of research of the research, 300 million kids. Whenever you hear people talking about the research says, we wanted to make sure we actually went to this work so we can see what the research actually does say and what the consensus is. We found that they also aligned, the Visible Learning Group and the AFT was aligned, and as was the federal government. They weighed in. So the feds weighed in 20 years ago with the National Reading Panel. Then also the Department of Justice came out with a report. If you really want to understand the school to prison pipeline, read that report. But all these things are aligned. Everybody's saying the same thing, and they've been saying it for decades. Yeah, so we started there. We also looked at what ACT said. So the ACT test is really strongly aligned with college success. And this reading benchmark, when kids in high school score 21 on the ACT, they do well in college. They do really well. You score below that and they struggle. Our kids are going to college with ACT scores down here, and that's a problem. When you looked at this chart, we realized, wait a second, there's no gap. And Tim Shanahan pointed this out years ago. I saw him talking about this as well. That there's really no difference. All these things we teach all the time, relationships, generalizations, conclusions, the authors, all that stuff. There's really no, like, you have to go from the bottom and you got to really make a lot of progress to get here to that benchmark level where kids can actually, you know, they've grown enough so that they can get to that benchmark and then be successful. So we found that the only thing really that stood out was complex text. So you complex text, if kids just improve a little bit on complex text, if they just learn to wrestle with, where they have access to wrestling with and know how to wrestle with text complexity at least a little bit, you find that they'll eventually get to that reading benchmark and have, you know, a greater chance of college success. That's true across all the demographic groups and everything. When you can wrestle with complex, that's one of the shifts in Common Core. It makes sense now to us why that's so important, is because when kids can do that, they're more likely to be successful. But when we talk to teachers and educators, they said they can't read. So how are they going to read complex texts? The answer, you know, AFT's been really good about this, called domain knowledge. A seminal piece, article that's posted on AFT's website. I'll put it on the end notes at the end. But that's the key to that, spiraling the knowledge that kids can really understand things, and then they can access more complex text. But the foundational skills, we found it just broken, just not even, you know, in Oakland, we didn't teach foundational skills systematically for 10 years. How are they ever going to get to a level of text complexity they needed? So when you look at American Federation of Teachers website, they come up with these 5 buckets. You know, these are the elements of an effective reading program. And I won't go through them all, but suffice it to say, in Oakland, we didn't have a strong core reading curriculum. Our materials were in line with the research. The PD was tied to the curriculum, which wasn't strong in the beginning, so the PD wasn't necessarily effective. And we had a wait to fail model where, you know, you wouldn't screen kids for risk of failure, and you wouldn't have a timely assessment and an intervention tier. You know, tier two was a mess. Tier 1 was a mess, but tier 2 was a mess as well. And it was a wait to fail model. When they get far enough behind, then we'll consider doing something about it if they advocate correctly. And then the assessments just went, you know, people were a level whatever and they didn't know what that meant. So some of the shifts we've made in Oakland, listen, people have said, wow, you're doing great things in Oakland. And I think we've come a long way, but really in about a year and a half, right before the pandemic to now, we've been able to adapt the reading curriculum. We've changed it. The district has changed it, and it's more aligned with the research, and the assessments are better. They now use iReady. So there are some things that are happening. They're not green, they're yellow. There's a long way to go. I'll explain that. These are some of the shifts that we're making. The question really is, and this is what we had to wrestle with, how do you design this program? How do you design your reading program? Right? To get up the steps. If the goal is to get as many kids up the steps as possible, you know, using this metaphor of knowledge building being a staircase, and the ability to read, and foundational skills being foundational elements and going up. How do you design it? How do you build it? And then what if you knew these criteria were there as well, these classifications? Some people really, they're going to figure it out. They're going to get there on their own. 45% got to take it one step at a time. You cannot skip a step. 45% of these climbers. What if you knew that to get those steps, you know, 15% had some sort of depth perception issues or they're distracted? That's really what we were wrestling. How would you design steps? And it's one thing to have a classroom, diverse group with all different ability levels and skill sets entering into the classroom. But then for a whole school, how do you build it, design it, so that you can get the most number of people up those steps? And then what about for a whole district? So when you're trying to get if the goal is to get the greatest number of people to top of steps, you really have to be intentional in the design of your program. And in this case, I'll use this metaphor of steps to try to illuminate this. So what we told Oakland Unified was, hey, look, you're skipping steps. In the beginning, you're skipping steps. That's a problem. We also told them, you know, we said, look, you don't have foundational skills here. So, you know, and a lot of these people, a lot of the kids needed one step at a time, 45%, and 15% have got some issues around processing. So this thing has got to be systematic. And they said, you know what, you're right. We agree, we'll partner with you. We had a grassroots coalition, but, lots of effort and energy went into getting them to re-evaluate how they were designing their reading curriculum. And so with all of their the positive intentions and their listening and et cetera, they came back with this. This was the result of a lot of engagement. And they said, okay, we got it. We did what you asked. We're right there with you. It's systematic, it's sequential, it doesn't skip steps. And look at those foundational skills, wide steps from the verb. They're right, it doesn't skip steps. It is sequential, it is systematic. But if the goal is to get the biggest number of folks, we were thinking something more like this. What's the straightest pathway there? With handrails or interventions, with carpet on there so you don't slip. Your tier 1 has formative assessments so that you don't slip and fall behind. And it's illuminated. The path is lit up. Like, these are some things, these elements that if you want to get people to the top, if your life depended on it, and our kids do, their lives oftentimes does depend on it, you're going to put some things in place. This isn't about being featured in some trade magazine or going to some fancy banquet where you talk about how wonderful your program is. We're trying to get people to the top. So the question I ask is, well, what does the design say about diversity and tolerance for loss and our true goals and priorities? All systems have some sort of website that has a saying, something like this. In every district, in every school, we all believe, and you just lay it all out. All these wonderful words and phrases. What we're trying to explain to the district, if you really want to assess your commitment to social justice, just show me the design of your reading program. Show me your budget. Show me your schedule. What does your reading program look like? Are you skipping steps because it's trendy? Because Lucy said to do it, that they don't need this, they can scoop up words, or they can, they can get clues or cues or whatever it is. Is that what we're doing? Show me the design. And then we can talk about whether or not it was intended for all kids, not just Black kids or white kids or poor kids or rich kids or kids who come in with a certain background, all kids. And then show me your budget and your schedule. So these are the type of things that we engage the district around. And sometimes we got along great, sometimes we didn't. It's still in progress, but we consider them allies. But those percentages actually align with the research about our kids. Because there's a certain number of kids who got to have it one step at a time. Guess what? There's some kids who need the reading one step at a time, or the acquisition of certain skills. It's got to be explicit and code-based and systematic and sequential, et cetera. This 5% who really don't even need us. They could probably teach us, as a matter of fact. I love the way Nancy Young lays this out. And then, in the stair analogy, I said there's some that may have some vision issues or some processing issues. Well, guess what? With kids with dyslexia, about 15% of kids, usually it's processing issues. So if you're really building it for all kids, what does it look like? AFT was right on point with what they said. And understanding that schools and school systems are complex places. So we're trying to tell Oakland Unified is, listen, with all the best intentions, you also have to be mindful of the dynamics of the school. So you want to keep it as simple as possible because there are all these variables that come into play. And on top of that, you have to manage change. And if any of these things is missing, it will produce those things on the right. And oftentimes we see this, whether it's a lack of communication, vision of the skills or incentives, et cetera. Like, these are the real challenges. So when you're crafting a program, you're trying to encourage a district to be mindful of how you actually move people. And there was this legend of, oh, this is just the pendulum swing. We had to get through that, when actually we said, listen, tell us the time when this actually happened, when you actually had these 5 things. The core curriculum, tier 1, had phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, comprehension taught explicitly, systematically, directly. When did that happen? Usually it's more of a legend than anything. No one can remember when it actually happened. And I'll end with this, Mother Maya, as I call her. She said, what I think we all need to take to heart, that in this generation, in this time, eliminating illiteracy is as serious an issue to our history as the abolition of slavery. I'll just leave it there. Thank you for your time and attention.
All right, we thank Kareem for joining us via video, as well as for the extremely informative video that he shared with us. Margaret, there is a question for you in the Q&A, short question before we jump into our whole group Q&A, and the question is, do you work with San Leandro? And if you'd like to, you can just actually go over to the Q&A and answer that question, or you can give it an answer verbally. All right, so here's where we're going for the last few minutes that we have together. We've got 3 whole group questions. We'll see which ones we can actually get to. But I think I want to start with this question because we have not touched on the role of school board members yet. We've got a chance to hear from the superintendent. We've talked a lot about what we're doing with teachers, even with school leaders. We talked a lot about the needs of children. But what I'm interested in hearing from the panel right now is this question. What should school board members be doing right now to improve the early literacy programs within their districts?
So if it's okay, I kind of touched on it a little bit, but from the role of the superintendent, what I would say is that they allow those initiatives and those resources to occur, and to also be understanding of change management and shifts, because if you do a pilot to scale, it makes the change process a little bit easier, but you are going to have people that until you change their experiences, until you change their expectations and therefore change their beliefs, they won't necessarily be on board. So resource allocation and also allowing change management to occur over time.
Thank you.
I would also add, ask questions. I mean, look at the data. What is the data saying? And ask questions about it. I mean, as many of the panelists here talked about today, the data showed that students were not doing well. And so we've got to stop being complacent about that and saying, oh, you know, throwing our hands up, well, 50% of our kids are not reading. And dig deep. Why? Why are they not reading? Is it instruction? Is it, you know, what is it that's happening? And so I think the role of a school board can be very important in asking those questions. It doesn't have to be accusatory. It can be in a supportive way, but I think, you know, the first step is take a look at your data and ask some questions.
I agree with that. Ask questions, become informed on science of reading research, being supportive, looking at the bright spots in the district, who is making progress, what's happening, and taking a deep look at their practices on the flip side as those that aren't making progress in reading outcomes, what's happening there, how can we support that as a board? You know, what can we put in place to help move the district forward in improving reading outcomes?
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions that have come in from our audience. So I actually want to just definitely jump in and get Sean's question now. And it kind of goes like this. He says, I'm running a program and I'm feeling burnt out. What would you recommend that I do? Can I focus my efforts on helping others remain in the fight? So I can kind of hear and feel Sean. Margaret, I feel you.
Yeah, I saw that question. So I feel like the energy for this work ebbs and flows. And one of the things that causes it to surge is when we feel like we're connecting with other people who have enthusiasm for the work and they're doing it from the angle, the position that they're in. So one of the things that I've been working on is creating what we call the coalition of the willing. Find the people who are enthusiastic, who are willing to make change, interested in doing it, get them the information that they need in order to be able to do their best work. Then they start reaching out to other people and it starts growing from there. And you need that surge of energy in order to reinvigorate yourself. So you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm ready again to do my part. I think one of the things that's really important to realize is that it is exhausting work. But what is fueling is being able to see that once teachers get access to this information, once leaders understand what changes need to happen, it's a fixable problem, and you can see signs of it getting fixed all along the way.
True.
Thank you. We have another question coming in from Lori. How critical is universal screening for assessing reading risk in early grades?
So critical.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone would say it's not critical. I mean, it's the whole, someone said something about why do we wait? You know, why do we wait until
Kareem.
3rd or 4th grade and then say, oh, there's a problem. And it's not just about universal screeners, it's about consistent and ongoing assessment so that you can see, you know, daily, how are kids doing? You should know exactly where every student in your class is in terms of their reading development. So I think that's a bigger key even than universal screeners, is making sure that we are both doing assessment, conducting assessments, and then analyzing that and doing something about it. One of the things we struggle with in LA County is that we have tons of assessment, we don't do anything with it.
Yeah.
And so we're teaching teachers, you know, what's the next step? What do you do then? How do you form groups? What do you do in that group? What if you don't have any curriculum left, except for what you've already taught? What do you do then? So those are kind of the deeper questions that I think go along with the whole notion of screening and assessment.
Yeah. Screening is critical because it tells you who is not on track for, you know, proficient reading outcomes. There's so much research behind the screeners that it's a critical element to have. And then you can't stop there. You have to go with a diagnostic. And but that screener is going to tell you so much about what's working and what's not at your core.
I think another thing that's really important is that teachers that I coach, primarily kindergarten, but it comes up in 1st grade too, will feel really good about how they're doing their job because they're connecting with students, engaging them, classroom management is solid. And then it seems like the kids were fine when they left me in the primary grades, but they go to the upper grades and then they have these comprehension issues. But it's not actually my responsibility to fix. When you get the screening data and you look at it, you're able to see like, no, there's actually holes in the foundation that are starting in kinder and 1st grade. And we need to transform the way that we're teaching reading in order for them to find more success with reading comprehension in the upper grades. So I think it allows kinder and 1st grade classroom teachers to be able to look at their practice in a different way so that it's not just about the management of a class, but it's actually about student mastery of specific skills.
Very well said. It's about vertical articulation, the data, being able to speak the same language across the grade levels.
And there is a second part to Lori's question, and it's just simply about the panelist awareness for the California Senate bill that is going to require K2 universal screening. If there is anyone that just has a thought reaction around that bill, love to hear that as well too, in response to Lori's question.
I'm aware.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, going through the process, I know there's a lot of opposition to it, and I don't really understand why there's such deep opposition in terms of English learners. I know there is a fear around misidentification in terms of special ed services, but I don't think any reading teacher wants to misidentify a student for anything. And so, you know, to me, it feels like the more we can assess and have a clear picture of the student using multiple measures, the better job we can do. But I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this will pass or not. It, you know, it doesn't look great. There's a lot of opposition.
Well, thank you so much to our audience as well as to our panelists for joining us during this time. We've now come to the bottom of the hour, as well as this is our stopping point. So I would just want to give thanks to everyone for joining us this morning and this afternoon. Thank you for the contribution of our panelists, and thank you for the questions that have come from the audience. And I want to just offer us an opportunity for us to continue to work together as a coalition of educators who are trying our best to make sure that all the children that are taught within classrooms throughout the country, as well as here in California, have exposure to the best possible literacy instruction that we know that they deserve and that they need. So we also want to make sure that we honor those that are doing the hard work each and every day in classrooms. And we also want to make sure that we're giving parents the thumbs up and the accolades they need too, as the key supporters of all the work that we do. So thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you all soon. Thank you again.
Thank you.